So you've obviously been in the business for a long time.
You're getting that point, aren't you?
Yeah. So
Okay.
so when you started at Fremantle, it was not a Scotty Brothers at the time, right?
Fremantle was sort of an aberration. That's like 30 years later. Fremantle started out as a foreign distributor,
Right.
And we acquired them. We had a company called All American Communications, and we acquired this foreign distributor called Fremantle. And then when we sold the whole shooting match to a company in England called Pearson. Pearson's a big company. They own the Financial Times and the Economist, and they owned a lot of television operations. But they bought us because they needed an American play. And then certain other things happened, and they needed a new name as opposed to Pearson. And for some reason or another, they picked up the name Fremantle, and it's been called Fremantle Media. And it's a very successful big company nowadays.
Yeah. And you did development at Fremantle, correct? Or
Yes, I did development. I did development in terms of non-scripted at
Right.
Fremantle. I'd done scripted development earlier, but at Fremantle it was non-scripted.
how would you describe a development to
Well, I think
like an incoming high school student or something?
Okay. I think my sort of mantra, if you would, in the business is recognize needs and then fill the need.
What are some examples, kind of like character needs or logistical needs or?
A need for a program. What is the reason to put this program on?
Okay.
Okay, now then I've got to package it. If it's a need to attract an 18 to 34-year-old male audience, what elements, what's the script, what's the content, what's the story?
And since audiences are constantly changing, what would you say are some of the current trends in programming?
I think that what's happened in terms of programming today is you must find programming to solve all the different demographics, with the exception of 50 plus.
Right.
Nobody cares about 50 plus. But otherwise, the
CBS does.
They don't care about it. They'd like to, get it younger and younger, even though they say those are the people who have the money, and they do have the money. But what really happened was, back in the beginnings of television, in the 50s and the 60s, they just went for households. There were no demographics, just went to households. It was ABC, who was having a terrible time, who came up with the concept of, let's go for 18 to 49-year-olds, because ABC happened to have that demo. They didn't get much of a mass audience, but they had that young demo. And then it's just gone from that point, because advertisers really like to target the demos. So I would suspect arguably the most successful network today is ESPN. And ESPN is the most successful network is because men have to have ESPN. They have to have it.
Right.
So you will buy 200 stations just to get ESPN. It makes it very valuable. And I suspect ESPN is the one that can charge the stations.
So nowadays, because of social media like Facebook or YouTube, or do you think that's an advantage to networks and companies to use those? And what are the benefits to individual content creators, like independent?
Yeah.
And what are the disadvantages of
I think
like
the networks have realized that they have to take advantage of social media, and that by doing so, they can build the numbers for their own shows, especially younger shows.
And would you say social media is a good tool for someone like an emerging filmmaker, or
Sure.
or just someone who's making stuff in their room to actively advertise themselves, I guess?
I think so. Anything you can do to build your brand.
Right.
And you have to recognize that you have a brand and you present yourself that way. So, for example, even though I don't have a tie on today, usually I wear a suit. I think of that as part of my brand. Not many producers or executive producers today do wear suits, but that's part of my brand. And using social media to reinforce your brand, to help define it, is a very big plus. I had a friend who realized this accidentally a few years ago. He did a movie called Soul Surfer. It wasn't a big movie. It was about a young woman in Hawaii who was a surfer, and her arm was severed.
I remember this movie, yeah.
Arm was severed there. Well, because she was young, she was on Facebook, and she blogged, and she used her time, her downtime, to really use social media. So when my friend started doing the movie, and my friend is my age, and this was a while ago, he all of a sudden realized that there was a real treasure trove here with people following this young girl, Brittany. And they were able to use that and exploit it and to get a much bigger audience, and made what probably would have been a very little $10 million, $12 million film into a $90 million film. And the social media really helped them expand and exploit that. There's a big creator named Tim Krieg, and I think his show was called Hero, which was a very successful show.
Oh, on NBC?
On NBC. Tim is somebody who really exploits social media. So while he had Hero going, or he had another one called Touch with Kiefer Sutherland a couple of years ago, and he's got another show that he's going to do pretty soon, he has a whole another universe existing.
Like online content?
Online content filling in the pieces between the hourly week.
Right, okay.
You know, the backstories of the artists, et cetera, that he disseminates, which reinforces the audience and helps build the audience. And that's become more and more important.
Thank you for watching this interview with Syd Vinnedge, and please watch the next video in this series.